All right, I'd like to call to order this meeting of the Hartford Selectboard on Thursday, December 8th, 2022 at 6:01 p.m. The first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, and Connie Kelly will be nice enough to lead us.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Connie.
Thank you, Connie.
Welcome.
All right, order of agenda. Don't see any changes coming on, so we will start with public comment. We will. Hey, there you go. We'll start with people in the room. Then we'll go to anyone on Zoom. Please identify yourself and your town of residence. You'll have 5 minutes to speak and ask that you refrain from any personal attacks. So go right ahead.
My name is Sarah Campbell and I live in White River Junction. And I actually prepared this as an email to send to the select board, but then when I found out you're having a meeting tonight, I decided to come over instead.
Great.
So pardon me, I'm going to read. So as a committee member on this on the town for over 5 years, the recent interviews are feeling very aggressive towards applicants. I've been uncomfortable for the applicants for multiple occasions in recent weeks. If I had not already been participating, I might be reluctant to apply for a volunteer position. Asking why they are interested and their background in an area feels like a good standard position. Asking them baited questions about how they personally will solve large societal or town issues comes across as antagonistic. This is my personal opinion. I'm not here representing my committee in any way, but you might consider a standard set of questions that are appropriate for each committee and don't put volunteers on the spot in a public forum. There have been several comments that are negative towards committees in general. While I very much support getting fresh faces who want to contribute to our town, while making long-serving members feel unwelcome and asking that every cycle we put reappointments through the application process is asking for more time and more paperwork from people who are volunteering for our town. Speaking for myself, I get a lot of value working with the town, and I hope that my contributions are making a difference. But I am hesitant to play gotcha with select board members so I can spend my free time serving the town. This environment comes across very discouraging, and I'm not sure there are many people who would want to consider applying for the first time. I really appreciate all that you do. I'm done reading. And this was an email I sent to you guys because I am incredibly emotional about this, and I have spent a lot of time working with this town, and I have been embarrassed for us about the way some of these committee appointments have gone. And so I don't really, I don't need a response, but I do really feel strongly that we could come up with a better way to engage our community members about the information that is in each committee without asking them, like, are you going to solve global warming? Or, you know, I mean, anyway, I don't want to go on and on. I just wanted to make sure that I had my feelings felt because I want to encourage people to participate in the town.
All right, thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you,
We
Sarah.
appreciate it. Anyone else in the room? Doesn't appear to be anyone. Do we have anyone on Zoom?
There are no hands up at the moment.
Okay, well, we will close public comment and we will get on to the budget reviews. So we're going to start.
Wait a minute, you're forgetting select board comments.
It's not on the agenda. So
I guess it's not. Okay.
so we will go, we will turn it over. We'll start with the police budget and we'll turn it over to Connie and then Gail, I imagine, as well. So
Sure.
thank
Welcome,
you.
everybody. We have Connie Kelly here, acting police chief, and Martha Morris from communications. And Connie will begin with the police department, which is Department 211. Each one of you have had a chance to look at the budget presentation and the budget book itself. And so Connie's going to hit some of the highlights. And once she's done with the police department, we'll open the floor to questions before we move on to communications.
Sounds great.
Do I have the ability to share my screen? Thank you.
Good evening. So our mission and our values, basically, we work to have the town trust us, our community members trust us, you know, and it says up there that we want to promote trust. Well, it's not just building trust, but it's maintaining the trust that we already have, that the community has in us. Fairness, we treat everybody the same. You know, everybody has an equal voice in our community. Whether they live in our community, they're visiting our community. We treat everybody the same. And our commitment is to our partnerships with community organizations, government agencies as well, but also our community. And we're here, we have a job because we have our community. Our community trusts us and they put their faith in us to protect them and to look out for their best interests as best we can as police officers. This chart is more of a breakdown of responsibilities than actually an organizational chart. So each box represents, some are actual positions, but they're also job functions of certain positions. So, you know, the chief of police oversees the deputy chief and the administrative assistant. The 4 boxes that are under the administrative assistant, those are job functions that she has, not necessarily people that she's overseeing. And then both chains that come off of that are basically the same thing. Right side of the chain for patrol is our squads, left side are job functions, different members of the department, and the same thing under support services. We have our job functions, communications, and the job functions of the criminal investigations division. Calls for service. When I ran the stat, November 18th, we had 7,910 calls for service. Those are actual calls that the police officers responded to. In checking, so when I figured out approximately where we would be at the end of this year, it should have been around 8,700. Currently, we're at 8,478 calls today. So we're on a pretty good track to be at about 8,700 calls for service this year.
Yes.
Which, sorry, you don't have to go back, but as you saw, 8,700 is the highest in the last 5 years. So more calls for service this year than any other year. So our proposed last year was 3,155,000. This year we're proposing 3,372,000, $217,000 difference. What that difference is funding, we have 16 patrol officers, so we have 4 squads. Each squad is comprised of 4 officers, 2 sergeant, a corporal, and 2 officers. 4.5 detectives, 4.5 that half detective is the SIU position. We fund that 60%. The 3 managers, that would be myself, the chief, and our lieutenant. Administrative assistant is our Diane Perry. And then our annually required training. We have certain training that we have to have annually to maintain our certification. All of that is funded in that. Employee recognition. While we always have recognized our employees, we've never had a line to actually put that under. So having a place where we can, you know, this is our budgeted amount to recognize our staff for, you know, either awards or just, you know, you had a rough call. And, you know, let me buy your lunch, things of that nature. And then standardized equipment for our cruisers. Currently, we have 2 cruisers, our supervisor cruisers, that have the exact same equipment in it. We should have that across the board for all of our cruisers. So that way, you know, it doesn't necessarily mean a sergeant's going to be the first person to a call. That maybe you need to make entry into a residence. You can see a person through the window. They're on the ground, they're unresponsive, you're banging on the window. It's important to have the tools to make entry into our residence. So equipping all of our vehicles so that we have those type of equipment readily available for everyone. The multi-use training equipment. We would rather purchase equipment that can be used for more than one thing. So for our defensive tactics, right now we have maybe 2 mats and a couple of pads that we use to practice our strikes and things of that nature on. We would rather purchase equipment that we can use for RAD. And RAD is a program that we are developing. It's a program that's out there. We are participating in it and creating our own for the Hartford community. But where we teach defensive tactics, primarily it's for women. And we have 2 instructors that just went to school to become, well, 2 officers that went to school to become instructors. So we're working on creating that program. We need the equipment to do it. So with that,
Was Brad brief?
rape, aggression, defense.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry. So, to have the equipment to teach that course, but also we can use the same equipment for our defensive tactics training. So it's serving a dual purpose for us. And that's wages. Last year was 2.6 billion. I apologize. I'm a little nervous. First budget meeting, I apologize. So,
Yeah, of course.
and so this year we're proposing 2.9. The difference is 330,000. That gives us, it's 23 budgeted positions. Of those positions, 17 are filled. We have 6 vacancies. All those vacancies are patrol base. So the 634,000 is based on patrol vacancy. So it's the base rate of an officer, because our vacancies are actually higher up in the chain where our sergeants are not filled those positions. So when we fill those with our promotional process in January, the 2 sergeants and the 2 corporals, then it opens up 4 more patrol slots. And currently, those will be 6 patrol slots that will be open. So that's where the 634,000 comes in. It's based on patrol office salary. And then the estimate of the union negotiated wage increase estimate, and then non-union wage increase. Our healthcare last year was 373,000. This year it's 392, difference of 19,000. There was an increase obviously in the healthcare and the dental care that played into that.
Can I stop you for a second, Connie?
Yes.
We're gonna take questions at the end, though.
Yeah,
Lanny,
there's just
once she
one more
gets done.
slide.
Yeah, as soon as she gets done through this, you can ask.
This slide, I apologize if it was confusing. These are just items that, I'm looking at in our department, the changes in our community's growth, and things that may serve us well in the future, things to start looking at. And basically, I just wanted to put those titles, the thoughts up there for you guys to look at. They're not things that I have budgeted for. They're just things that I'm looking at in the future and researching to see if they would play a role for our community and our department. Employee wellness, to me, that's a big piece. I just came back from Roger Williams at the end of November, Roger Williams University, and that was a big piece that they talked about. And when you think about it, the average person doesn't deal with the things that police officer deals with, a communication specialist deals with, or a firefighter deals with. We see things that nobody should see. And eventually those things take a toll on you. And it's good to have practices in place to make sure that we're taking care of our employees. Community service officer, I'll be honest, some of these things I don't know a lot about myself. That's why I'm researching it. Community service officers, those would be people that, could handle the municipal ordinance violations, VIN checks, fingerprints, things of that nature, instead of tying an officer up on those. Kelsey is amazing. She does an amazing job. Her caseload is huge. We could probably use 5 Kelseys, but we gotta start small, maybe increase one more Kelsey.
And Kelsey's in social work, correct?
Yes. An additional analyst. We have Victoria Milne that works at the police department. She's assigned by the Vermont not task force, but see, I'm nervous. I can't even remember. Thank you, the National Guard. She is like Kelsey. She is a whirlwind. She does an amazing job. So when we have cases that have some type of drug nexus, and that's the only cases that she can work on, has to have a drug nexus. So we work really hard to find some type of drug nexus with any type of call, because then we can use her services in them. And she is able to take a cell phone and find data in it that would amaze you. And those are services that we ordinarily would have to pay for, but she's embedded in our department. She is loaned to us by the National Guard, and she does all these services within her scope of work with us. By adding an analyst, the benefit would be is that we could use those skills across the board for all cases. So Officer Clifford, he handles a lot of the ICAC cases, which are internet crimes against children. So the cases that he's handling, the analyst, if there's a drug nexus to it, she can pull a lot of the data for him and, pull like human trafficking, all of that stuff and see where those things are happening and what nexus it has to the town of Hartford. If there's no drug nexus, we can't use her and we're paying for those services, or we're waiting a long time to get the data back sent to us because we're using an outside agency. So having an additional analyst that we could use and not necessarily need to have the drug nexus, a part-time administrative assistant. Currently, our administrative assistant, just a few of her roles, she does our payroll, our invoices, daily office function, she schedules all the fingerprints. On top of that, the real time consuming piece of it is discovery. What discovery is every time we send a case down to court, you'll have the prosecuting attorney wants to have all of the case records associated with it, all the reports, statements, everything that's associated with it paper-wise, but then all the digital media that we have that's associated with it. So she has to compile that for the state's attorney, but then she'll get the same request as well for the defense attorney. So she's doing the same work. She always has to do the same work twice. So a simple case, like simple assault, you're looking at maybe something that thick. Our current case that we've been working on at the Comfort Inn, the shooting over there, paperwork stack is probably about this high. So she's, organizing all of that and sending it to court. So it's time consuming. You only have 7 to 10 days. That's your deadline. Otherwise, it can be viewed as a technicality and a defense attorney could dismiss the case on that because they didn't get the discovery in time. She averages probably about 8 to 10 of those requests a day. Simple record requests for insurance companies for crashes. Citizens coming in, they want a copy of their report. She has to, compile all of that in a reasonable time fashion for the public as well, and the insurance companies. And then there's expungements. So basically what that is, if somebody petitions the court to have their record cleaned, we can basically expunge. She has to go through all the data and remove their information from the case. The case still stays, but she has to go through every single report and remove their name. So it's a lot of work for one person. So having a part-time person and also for management, but she's the only one who truly knows her job. So when she's on vacation, all of this stuff sits and waits. So having another person that can handle those type of requests when she's not here. And then the flock cameras, I learned about those when I was at Roger Williams as well. And we just had a demo on them. I think they would be beneficial to the town, at least as a pilot program. Basically what it is you have a camera, it runs by solar power. You can use it. So probably the easiest and best example for using it is we had one mounted out by the gorge, and we had a BOL sub come in for, a blue Honda Civic with a Vermont plate. And they were, the parent called and said, my child said they're headed to the gorge. They're suicidal, they're headed to the gorge. We can enter into the system for the flock camera, blue Honda Civic, that general area, and it will notify us as the cars are going by. So if we had it, maybe necessarily right at the gorge, but in a cross section that, or you had multiple cameras, but it would alert us that that vehicle actually came by rather than having an officer sit out there for several hours. Or, you're driving out there several times during your shift, you might miss it, miss the person at the gorge and you're not there at the person's time to meet. So it's still researching that, but it sounds like there could be some benefits to it for the town.
Great.
Questions?
Lynn?
Yeah, first thing I guess is I can completely understand the need for an analyst. I think data gives you a lot of ability to understand the crime in the area. So my question would be, what would be the cost of an analyst if you were to have a full-time staff analyst? You have any projections?
I don't. I would have to do a little bit more research on that.
Okay. And then the question alongside of that, would the analyst that you have being able to have her just go through drug crimes do you have any not sure how quite to phrase the question. Is there? Can you give me a number of crimes that you've been able to bring to court because of the assistance of this person? Is there any?
I can have that data pulled for you. I wouldn't know off the top of my head how many cases that, I mean, she works primarily in the detectives unit, so
Okay.
they do their best job to utilize her on almost every case that they have any type of drug connection with.
I mean, I can understand the need for that, but in order to sell it to the taxpayers,
Right,
it would be good to know how much she has attributed to
Mhm.
actual crime reduction in the town of Hartford. That would be a good selling tool for that. And then the other question I guess I had about the flock grants, flock, yeah. Do you have any grants that are available out there for the flock cameras?
so what the company had told me is that what they do is they go out, they'll work with existing infrastructure that you already have. So our schools have cameras. If they want to be part of it, they could use that. If we had cameras at our intersections already mounted through the state, they can tap into those as well and just put in their software. So we're not even paying for the infrastructure on those pieces. And the other part that they will do is they'll go out, if there's an area, they'll come in, they'll do an assessment for the town for you. And they'll tell you where they think is the most bang for your buck to put the camera. If there's commercial businesses in those areas, they'll go out and talk to the commercial businesses and say, you know, you've had a lot of catalytic converters stolen. Do you want to pay for this camera for the town of Hartford? It would be covered. It's going to reduce the potential thefts for you. Do you want to have a financial investment into this? So they'll do that piece. Grants, literally, I had my demo from them 2 days ago, so I don't have a lot of the research done yet, but I'm certain that there's grants out there.
And they are a 360 camera, or are they just like the focal point camera?
It's a focal point camera, but it will cover 2 lanes of traffic.
Okay. Yeah. And it would be nice to know if there's grants available for that, though,
Right.
pay for that too, so. And do you know the cost off the top of your head of
Yes,
what's the flow?
25. So the camera itself is $2,500. It's a $350 install fee. The annual, and then after that, it's $2,500 per camera per year. So what they do is they maintain, so let's say somebody goes out and breaks one of the cameras, they'll replace it, the first one free of charge. If something happens to the second camera that they, replace it the second time, they'll charge you the install fee.
And I'm sure you've thought about the placement of where you would see cameras. I mean, have you thought about how many would you say that you personally would like to see in the town?
I think to start 5 cameras would be appropriate.
And can you say where those would be placed?
One in the, like I said earlier, in the general area of the gorge. Then I would have one in the area of the Rotary.
Mhm.
I would like one in West Hartford. There's a lot of stuff that happens, we have one commercial business out there that has had substantial loss to catalytic converter theft. So, having one strategically placed out there. Same thing with sort of one downtown, and then Wilder somewhere in the area of Hartford Ave. I don't know exactly where I would put it, but
Yeah, I can see the
basically
benefit.
each village would have a camera strategically placed.
And the other thing for selling points on the flock cameras would be to make sure that if we get these out there, that it wouldn't be Big Brother's watching, personnel related things. So
With that, we don't have access. You have access, but you have to do a search. So it's not just live feed running through your cruiser on a regular basis. You have to have a reason to go into the camera to search the database. So, and when you search, you actually they have some fail safes in there for that very reason. So let's say I'm looking for a red hatchback and I know it's got a V in the plate. I can put a V in the search field, red and hatchback. And I have to put my time frame in, but I also have to include as to why I'm looking for that. So it's going to track who's running the query, the date and time of the query, and the reason for the query. And if you don't put in a reason and there's a certain field it has to be criminal, or it has to have some type of case number associated with it. So if there's a case number associated with it, there will be a report associated with it.
Biggest thing
It'll pull everything that.
biggest thing I
fits
think
that.
people are worried about nowadays is like facial recognition
There's
stuff.
no facial recognition,
Okay,
it's
good.
based on the call.
Okay, that's excellent. Definitely see the need for that.
And the only way that the information is saved is if it's associated with a criminal case.
Very
And then
good.
it's pulled through our cameras that we already have access on.
Seemed like a fairly reasonable cost too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
$2,500 is cheap for something of that technology.
It was pretty impressive. The detail that you could get on the cameras was, I was pretty impressed with it. I'm sure if you guys were interested in having a demo, he would come up and do a demonstration of the cameras for you guys as well.
No. Good. Other questions, Mary?
I just have a quick question, just because it's interesting, but scary at the same time. Is the multi-use training equipment that can be used for RAD and defensive tactics training? Is that specifically for women, or is it for the training? I don't know what the equipment would be.
So, Brad, you have, that would be specific to community members that wanted to take the class.
Oh, okay.
So it would be a red man suit. So basically, you don a suit and you can practice hitting somebody. So I went to RAD probably about 12, 13 years ago. When I was a school resource officer, we used it as a team building exercise for the teachers and myself as well. And we all went through the course. And they put you in real life situations where things could happen. And they give you the means to get out of those situations. So, you're at the ATM, someone comes up behind you and grabs you. How do you get out of that? And it teaches you how to do that. But the person who's, the one grabbing you, they want to have a little bit of protection because you're being taught how to kick,
Sure.
punch and elbow and do what you need to do to get away. So it benefits its dual purpose for that course, but then also for our training when we have to do our defensive tactics training.
Okay.
Our instructors don't want us hurting them.
Because I think my daughter took something like that when she went to UVM.
Most colleges
Yeah.
do have it. Dartmouth had it, or I assume they still do.
Thank you.
One more. Oh, go ahead. Give one more. And I know you can't answer this question, but I really like to have you think about it. We have talked about down to the solid waste facility about potentially turning on that into training site. And it would be interesting to know what your department would gain from having training down there, as far as whether it would be cost reduction in terms of having to send officers somewhere for training. Whether we could do more training here. I know we could set up a firearms course down there for training, but for long range thinking, it'd be interesting to know what there would be for available uses of that for your department. And that would potentially save the town money versus sending officers away for training. That'd be, and I'm going to ask Scott the same question because so that would definitely something that we could utilize that area for down there. So it's just something to think about. And again, I know you can't answer it and I don't expect an answer, but if you just think about that. Yeah.
Kim, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you so much for answering most of my questions already, so I don't have that many, but I did want to revisit a couple things. And I think these might be more with the finance director or acting town manager than with the department, because relating to reserves and the lot funds. But in another topic that I don't think I got to with my questions was the City Protect program that's used for like incident reporting. Does the department have any other means or initiative or interest even in having something more specific? Like I know it's come up during HQA meetings a number of times in terms of wanting data, and I'm not quite clear on exactly what is collected from data to begin with, who's identifying as what, who's doing the identifying of things like race, gender, ability, that kind of stuff.
I see some town, like we've looked at Springfield, and theirs seems almost like alarmingly too specific in sharing information about incidents, like literally names, addresses. I guess I'm wondering if there's something in the middle between this very vague descriptions in City Protect and what Springfield does, like.
I can research what might be out there to be able to, so you're looking to put it like on our website page.
Yeah, there used to be like, until not too long ago, local newspapers would have like the police blotter.
Right, and
you know
we
what I
used
mean?
to put that on our Facebook page and then people weren't very happy about it.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
we pulled back from that and just did major press releases that we posted to Facebook. I was planning on starting what you guys get in your SIGACs,
Yeah.
the breakdown of what we have for calls. I don't think it's gonna give you the detail that you're looking for, but I was gonna be running those weekly and start posting that just so the community sees it. As well as, the select board seeing that.
yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just keeping it budget related, like this might be, so this is definitely something that is, part of the strategic plan for equity and inclusion involves a lot of data related observations and quantitative stuff that way. So I don't think this is a very specific request at this time, and certainly not from an individual board member. But it is definitely something that may come at a later time as a more formal request. So I just thought I would throw it out there. And then if I have questions about the lot and reserves, can I ask that now or should I wait? Yeah, so I guess I'm curious, just I think $25,000 in reserves is not enough. And I just imagine that there are that and I guess maybe more importantly is what is in reserve that's available, like what would that be adding to? Maybe that would help satisfy, like it's not just 25,000 that would be in that reserve account after.
Correct. So in the 2023 budget, we actually are utilizing all of the reserves in the police department to make the purchases for their equipment that they need. So we will be starting at a bare minimum in 2024. The question was asked, is it sufficient funding? No, it's not. But that's a decision that the board needs to make. Do you want to continue to save and pay to meet the capital needs, or do you want to just have it come out of the tax rate, the tax burden every single time? So for this particular year, for 24, we were being exceptionally conservative at the 25,000, knowing that next year, in 25, we're going to have to bump it up. Having the transition that we've had at the police department, and Connie being so gracious stepping into it, she's learning the ropes of what is needed, the capital planning piece of it. So that's another reason why we did the conservative part. We do know that we need to replace cruisers every year. We got way behind many years ago, and we had not great equipment. Where finally we have the equipment that the officers need, and in order to maintain that, we need to make sure that we're making those annual deposits to make sure that we have them. So in a nutshell, is the 25,000 sufficient? No, it's not. But being conservative for this particular year, we felt that it was fair. We certainly would be open to a larger deposit amount. However, to be conservative. As far as the lot piece goes, again, trying to reduce the tax burden, and there's not sufficient funding in the reserve. So that's the reason why we're looking for a closer run.
Anyone else have thoughts about that?
Give you a sense of what the annual was, what the reserve, like the contribution was over past budgets.
We actually didn't even have
Oh, we
a
didn't.
contribution. We just started this, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago. And we've been able to fund items out of the reserve account. This is the year that we've gotten to the point that we're at the point, because of the situation last year with the budget, we actually had to take more out of the reserves than we had planned on to help balance everything out. So
Is there a number out there that we would would or could consider, or is it?
At a minimum for what I know about what the needs are for the police department, a minimum of 60,000 a year to help them build, because we know what we have to replace
Yeah.
every year.
Okay.
So again, we're being exceptionally conservative based on what we had to do to clean up from or pick up from last year.
Yeah, okay. Elaine?
Do you know, Gail, off the top of your head, what a $50,000 price tag would raise taxes?
I don't know off the top of my head.
So if we were to actually double it, though, I'm curious that would, I mean, we
Can
still wouldn't
certainly-
reach, we
can
wouldn't reach
certainly get that.
exactly. Yeah, we wouldn't reach what we needed for the 60, but it would certainly get us a lot closer than we are now. And I think that's, I mean, we always have a focus on public safety within the town of Hartford. It's one of our, that's the number one goal is the town of Hartford's public safety. That's definitely something to consider. So
Yeah, I would think so, either 50 or 60. If 60 is a recommended number,
60 is recommended, but I'm just thinking for conservatively, if we went 50 to see where it's gonna get us. And that would be a place to start.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I, David, would you bring Ally over as a panelist, please? Thank you.
Okay, Mary?
Just a quick question. I know somebody's told me this before, but I can't remember. How much is when you replace a cruiser, what's the cost?
So when you replace a cruiser, you not only are replacing the vehicle itself, you're replacing the fit up.
Right.
What we've transitioned to is making sure that we have universal equipment. So
Okay.
saying that, as an example, you don't want to go from a sedan to
Right.
an SUV. And so over the years, we've transitioned to SUVs for, did I say that right? Yes, for you.
Yes.
To make sure that we can transition that equipment very easily. And so we're looking at about 52 to 55,000 to
Okay.
replace a vehicle and fit it up.
Right.
And that's for a brand new vehicle and the fit up. If you have items that you can transition over that have not aged out, you could probably do it closer for 45 to 48.
And if you can't, can you sell?
We do, correct.
So the cruisers don't get turned in as far as for trade-in, or they don't get, do they get
Depending on the condition of them, if we can trade them in, we certainly trade them in. If they're have no value to trade them in,
Yeah.
then we would have to sell them outright. We've been fortunate enough that we've been able to trade them all in.
sorry about that, my phone rang.
Rocket?
Would this be earmarked to, I mean, I'm a little bit confused as putting it into a reserve fund versus like a capital project or a depreciation fund? Would it be earmarked separately for the cruisers and so?
That's correct. In a separate fund.
Okay, because we do that with fire department with the ambulance and.
That's correct.
Okay. And are you suggesting we are not doing that now and should do it? And is this separate or different than a reserve fund that would be used for other things such as that laser drug identify,
No, this would be specific for reserve fund
Yeah.
for the police department to replace equipment that they need. It certainly could be either cruisers,
Okay.
it could be radios, high ticket items that are required to, they're on an age limit, and we know that they're going to age out, and we know that they need to be replaced. And so are we doing it now? We have been doing it, as I stated earlier, because of what happened in the 23 budget. We actually depleted the reserve account much faster than what we had anticipated.
So I'm of the mind that we should be contributing to this so that we don't compound an issue that later we're gonna, future generations of leadership are gonna have to, or future years of leadership are gonna have to deal with. At the same time, I also think with all the transition, one thing I wanted to do is actually thank both of you women for stepping up into the roles that you have. I know, especially Chief Kelly, like a year ago, you were a road sergeant maybe, and it's been a wild ride since. So I do want to acknowledge that we're both here and thank you for that. And I also am wondering what the proper relationship would be with the select board in terms of saying, because I hear what you're saying, Gail, that there's been a lot of shifting and changes. And so being conservative about the way we budget for that does make sense to me, so long as there's also confidence in the select board to know that we would support you through any of those unexpected changes in the next year as those things come up. So I think that to me makes sense because it keeps it nimble. And at the same time, I'm feeling like maybe we have an obligation to earmark some funding aside for this capital reserve account or depreciation account. do you have advice for us in terms of the way we should think about that?
I think that you should put on your list of items. We're
Mhm.
going to have wrap-up items, wrap-up meetings,
Mhm.
at least 2 of them. And so I will put it on my list as well, but I recommend all of you, as you listen through the budget presentations, that you have recommendations of either increasing or decreasing. So that's the best that I can offer right now, because we're having the fluid discussions and we're not making any
course.
decisions.
Perfect, thank you.
Go ahead, Lenny.
Yeah, one more question, Connie, and I'm not sure you can answer this one. When 9/11 happened, there was a whole influx of government money that came to police departments in particular for safety. How many of those items that were purchased with all that federal money are we talking about having to replace? And what is the usage? I'm trying to get an understanding of, I know that we want to keep things up to date, but are we having enough usage of equipment, specialized equipment, that we need to be spending the money because it's outdated? Or is
So-
it stuff we could get from like state police or something?
So some of the equipment, there's a program called 1033. So basically there's items that are assigned to our department from the state. They just ended the program. So we actually are scrambling a little bit. We had to make purchases of the sights on our rifles, the sights on our less than lethal launchers. We have to give those all back to the state. Our binoculars have to go back to the state. They haven't, we know the program's ended. They haven't told us exactly when we need to turn the equipment in, but when they say we want our equipment back, we need to send it back to them. So we've been making those purchases. We've replaced all of our sites. And I just placed the order for our binoculars that we have to return to, because every cruiser needs a set of binoculars. So those type of things, like, we can't always rely on other agencies to loan us their equipment because eventually the well runs dry.
Standardized equipment. I understand standardized equipment,
Okay,
but I'm just curious about specialized equipment that was, like, I know that after 9/11, departments went out there. There's some departments, I know we didn't do it. They got like a Bearcat or something like that. Something of that nature, like tactical equipment. Is there anything that was specialized that was purchased after 9/11 with government grants that we don't really have the need for nowadays? Or of course, there's always a need, but I mean,
so in all honesty, a lot of equipment, so back then I was a patrol officer. I was pretty fresh in my career, so those decisions were way over my head back then.
how much of that equipment is still around though?
Well, and that's what I was just getting to, is typically what we do is as we upgrade equipment, we trade it in. So Lieutenant Howell currently, he'll go through our armory. They'll find equipment, we don't use this, we don't use that. I'm gonna give Paris a call. Can they give us a credit on this piece of equipment that we need to buy?
Okay.
And we're
Excellent.
constantly doing that.
Excellent.
So I suspect, like, equipment, if we did purchase stuff back then based under that grant, we don't have it anymore. We traded it in and traded out.
There's a major hype as far as everybody's worried about everything after 9/11, and a lot of things were purchased that frankly don't get used so nowadays.
Right.
So okay.
Yeah, when we
that's-
find we don't have useful equipment, we find a way to
Yeah.
trade it for something that's gonna be more useful to
I
us.
appreciate that. Thank you.
Any further questions before we give it up?
Ally. Ally?
Ally's on.
Okay.
She does not.
Does she-
Dan or Ally, if either of you have questions, go ahead and chime in. I mean, I still wanted to finish up the local option tax. I mean, I guess this is the recommendation, is that that's how those 2 things are funded, the police cruiser fit up and because we just need to recognize that there is a small chance that voters might not approve that, and if not, then it's not funded, or you feel confident that you might be able to find other sources of funding.
We would have to find other sources because it is specifically equipment
It's
that they need to, it's a need
I
that they
guess
need
that's why I
to.
feel uncomfortable putting something like that to the voters. Like, if it's something that we can't do without, objectively can't do without, then we should just make that decision to put it in the budget and look for something else to ask the voters for that's in the budget currently. I mean, is it possible? Could we revisit that? And I'm happy to
Yeah,
try
we
to look some
certainly,
more.
yeah, we certainly can. And that's, very similar to the reserve part of it. Let's bullet point it, let's revisit it. Take another look at the budget and see if there's other items that we can potentially move out of the tax rate piece and move to the local option tax.
Like,
I mean, like, for example, now that I realize that the flock cameras and those are the futures things that I was very excited about are not, I mean, that would be the kind of thing that we could pull out and say, if the voters support this, let's go forward with this now. And if not, maybe we wait till another time. Does that make sense?
the one thing that we as a board have still not decided on is ARPA funds. And if we have some of these ARPA funds that we use towards projects in the town, we could free up other funds towards these things. So we have got to get closer to making a decision on expenditure for ARPA funds,
Yeah.
because that would very likely free up a lot of other areas within the budget to be used for things of this nature. So I'm not sure when our discussion is on that, but we need to bring that to the forefront. And, I'm not saying spend it because we have it, but we could make a lot of impact on police, fire, and public, and, the public works by utilizing ARPA funds towards things that have been outstanding and freeing up money towards these specific items.
That's a great point, Lanny. So it's really, really important as we move through all these budget presentations that we take these notes and we decide the funding sources, what the needs are, what the board values for the needs. And then we make that determination. We have to have the list of items. You need to know what everything that's in front of you first before you can make the decision of where you want it to pull it from or put it into. And so having this list, we know what we have for ARPA money of the town general fund budget. What you have here tonight is probably the second largest piece of the town budget. Next week, when we meet on the 15th, that's the largest piece of the general fund. All the moving pieces. So it's really important that we have all this information, we take detailed notes, and when we come back together in January to look at you as a board are going to have a discussion. I think we should reduce this, we should increase this, and you can have the fluid discussion of the funding part of it. And do you want to take some of it and put it in ARPA, fund it that way? So I appreciate you making that statement, because it really, really is important to keep all of this in mind as we're working towards those wrap-up discussions, the capital planning discussion, and how you're going to get it funded.
You have such an opportunity, ARPA funds, to make a huge impact on public safety in this town and public works, which is public safety. And we should definitely utilize those funds in a manner that will do so.
Any other questions on this? Okay, thank you, Dana.
Okay, so
Thank you, Connie.
Before we move to communications, I just want to make sure that I recap on the questions that we need to follow up on. Analyst costs, an additional analyst, what that would cost. Number of crimes brought to court assigned by the analyst. Flock cameras, are there grants available? Cost savings or use of utilizing the solid waste facility for training uses. City Protect, is there a similar program that kind of finds the balance between being over specific to being vague? What is the cost of increasing for 50,000 for reserves?
I'd say 62 if we can get the number.
I'm sorry.
It's 60 as well, because
Okay.
that was the recommendation.
Well, you're going
And-
full gusto.
Well,
And then
if you get
the
a recommendation for 60, why 250?
and then the last item is a bullet point as well to follow up on lot funding, and are there other items in the budget? So the last two items we will table until we have our discussion in January.
Yeah.
And then the other items that I mentioned, I'll work with Connie and make sure that we get an answer for you by the close of business on the 16th.
I don't think that Connie or anybody can come up with an answer by the 16th about what an impact would be in the public, in the solid waste. I mean, that's a lot that we could do down there. So I don't expect to have something by the 16th for that, but just for thinking further ahead.
Well, no, I
you know.
disagree, because if we pay for training elsewhere, we know what the cost is to go elsewhere. So at least we would be able to have that information available. If we're paying on site for training to go elsewhere, there's a fee for it. We know what that is. And if we don't have to pay that fee.
Yes, we look at it like that. Yeah,
It's kind of where I'm coming from.
of course, it's gonna cost us money to put a facility there, but nevertheless, I
Well,
think in the long run, it would recoup our funds.
I think at
So-
least if we know what we're currently paying to have training done elsewhere, that's the starting point.
Yeah.
Knowing that there will be equipment and or renovations that needs to be done to make the facility an appropriate site.
Yeah, you're right.
Great, thank
So let me
you.
just finish my notes and
Yep.
then we'll go on to the next one. You're all good?
Great. So this is the, for communications, the budget and, presentation of basically what they do.
Which fund is this?
This
Sure.
is the 271.
Okay,
Correct.
And so for 2022, we're at 18,059 calls. Those are calls that our dispatch center is handling that are non-911 calls. They're based in our Spillman system that we share with other agencies. However, on top of that, so we're a PSAP for 911. Oh, sorry. So of the 18,059 calls, those are just calls that are going into our Spillman system. On top of that, we're 911 PSAP, and we're also a 911 rollover desk. The PSAP handles an additional 17,488 calls. That's on top of the 18,000 calls. So of those 18,000 calls, one of our communication specialists could be on the phone handling car accident, minor car accident, fender bender. But then the 911 call rings and they're talking to somebody through CPR. So they're doing both things at the same time. We have a separate desk that's grant funded with an MOU, which we'll talk about after. But that takes in an additional 5,734 calls that they've handled so far in the time that we've had that grant. So total calls that have come into the dispatch center, including the 911 calls, are 41,241 calls. So
This calendar year.
this calendar year. For our funding. So we're a regional dispatch center, which means we dispatch for other agencies as well as our own.
how many, you know?
So we dispatch for 11 towns in Windsor County with multiple agencies within those towns. PD, we currently have 3 PDs. Fire departments, we have 12 fire departments and 7 EMS agencies.
Okay, thank you.
And we're looking to take on another 3 police departments additional. So with our funding, the blue is Hartford. So Hartford is funded from our budget of $751,000. The green is what is funded by contract towns, the $442,000. The orange is what we get, is the $194,000. That's what we get reimbursed from the state. So that's what the state is paying us to handle the PSAP. It's not the MOU with the grant calls that we're taking. Those are the PSAP calls that are coming in for 911. And the 194,000, correct me too, Marty, if I'm wrong. That number is fluid. So if we fall below a certain number of catchment of calls, you'll get paid less. If you handle more calls, you'll get paid more. We typically are at 94%.
And we need to answer 90% of the calls presented to us to be able to get the funding.
And we typically answer 94%, so we're above that. So last year's budget was 1,087,000. And this year the proposal is 1.3, the difference is 225,000. That is funding the manager that's in dispatch and the PSAP administrator, 9 full-time communication specialists, 1 communication and information systems coordinator. Basically, that person is our Dylan that's in-house, so that person handles all of our Spillman. So if Spillman goes down, they're able to fix our Spillman more often than not. On occasion, they do have to reach outside, but typically that person's able to solve our IT problems in-house. It includes also our step increases and employee recognition. Like on the police side, it's never been anything that's been a budgeted item, so added it there. The increase in the expenditures, that is adding a full-time communication specialist. The person who went to the information systems coordinator position came out of a dispatch role, so that position is vacant. They still do cover dispatch, but their primary function is the IT piece in our building. We'd like to add an additional full-time communication specialist, especially with taking on an additional 3 towns. We have been afforded a grant. We're hesitant to use any of the grant money. The grant money is based on taking on new towns because of the state stepping back in their dispatching abilities. Quite frankly, they're short-staffed. They're not able to provide the services that they once were. So they've stopped dispatching for other communities and are just strictly dispatching for V.S.A. With that going on, it's put the excess onto us, hence the extra 911 desk just handling the 911 calls. But also it's left those smaller agencies looking for another dispatch center. So they've been coming to us and asking, for our services. Yeah. To be able to accommodate taking on another 3 agencies, we would need another dispatcher. And then it also includes our tower lease, which is 36,000, and the Hanover Elon, that is doubled this year. And that basically is the rent for the connections to make everything work with the communication.
What does
centers.
Elon stand for?
Do you know what Elon actually stands for?
System.
Oh, just communications then.
It is a secure virtual trunk that connects all the radio towers between us, specifically Hanover Dispatch.
Okay.
Allows us the rollover capabilities, so if Hartford system crashed, Hanover can throw a switch and do all the functions that Hartford was doing.
Okay.
From their agency as well. But it also is the communication path that all the radio transmitters work on. So we lease some radio space for Hanover. They use some of our frequency band to communicate in. And then the new simulcast radio system that you funded last fiscal year is about to go online and is going to communicate through that same hardline internet connection that's between all radio towers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That's my baby.
I appreciate the help. The increases.
Yeah,
The
increased
project,
revenues.
yes, so the projected revenue increase due to the 911 rollover detail. So what that is, we've estimated, because we've never had this grant before, for the 911 rollover detail. Looking at the hours that are being put in on the desk and trying to forecast, we've only had it for a few months. Trying to forecast what that actually is going to cost. We were estimating it's going to be about $99,000, but then we're reimbursed the $99,000. But we needed to show where that money's coming in and that the money's also the money's going out and then the money's coming back in. And then, as I said before, they decided the state to recalculate how they reimburse the 911 PSAP desks, and it's based on the number of calls that are handled. And clearly, we're going above what is expected of us for the handling of calls. So we're not going to have a problem, I believe, maintaining that $194,000 coming in. Wages, last year was $829,000. This year is $973,000. The difference, the $144,000. what that is covered is mainly, I think the difference you're gonna see is the addition of the communication informations coordinator and then adding the extra dispatcher to help take on more towns. And then also the non-union wage increase and then the union negotiated estimated increases. The differences in the healthcare, last year was 129,000, this year's 157,000, a rough $28,000 difference. Questions?
Lenny?
Yeah, it's great to hear that we're looking at taking on more towns, Connie, but that brings up a question of, do we have the equipment capabilities to do so with our
So-
communications?
We were awarded a grant that is based on the state knowing that they were going to be disbanding, taking on the smaller towns. So we were awarded $479,000 in a grant to basically put in another console system in our agency, and it'll also help fund some of the 911 calls that are coming in and the workload. But we can't take that on, so we're hesitant to spend any of that money until we know whether or not we're going to be able to hire the extra dispatcher. So we don't want to have to be in a position of paying back the money.
So with that other console, we definitely have the bandwidth to handle 3 extra towns plus some, I would assume.
I
So,
defer to Marty.
sure. So that grant is also funding the infrastructure that we're going to need for those additional police departments. So everything to make the connection to us. So it won't be on the Hartford frequency. It will be on a new frequency that will be established for those police departments. And
So are we receiving funding from them for this?
that's part of the grant.
Okay.
That's
All right.
part of the grant. And that grant also covers what we would need in the dispatch center, the additional console, the computers on the console. Everything was included in that to get us up and running to take on those additional agencies.
Okay.
So Marty, I think maybe what Lanny's trying to ask is that once it's established, we have the console set up and we have these 3 additional departments, they will be paying us an annual
Oh,
fee,
yes,
correct?
I'm
Like
sorry,
all the other ones.
I misunderstood.
I'm
Yes.
trying to get at that, but
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So yes, they would be brought into the current system of how we are billing out for the other contract towns. So yes, they would be
Okay.
added into the mix.
Excellent. And then the one thing that I'm very concerned about, you spoke about health insurance. Mental health for dispatchers is extremely important. You're the first line that somebody contacts. And the mental health piece for you guys is paramount. And I just want to make sure that you have that resource available primarily because I know there's burnout among dispatchers, and I want to make sure that we have good health availability. So that's a key element.
Thank you. That's appreciated.
Kim?
So I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly, that like when we're talking about that adding the annual fees from the other 3 departments, is that incorporated into this 442,000 in the pie chart with the green section? Is that anticipating?
No, it's not anticipating.
That's before, that's not, so it will go up beyond. And when we look at like, because I had flagged in the revenue section, the dispatch fees, there was a projected increase of 37% more, like an additional 173, almost 774,000. Does that take into account projected fees for 3 more?
Sure. Sorry. I don't believe that it does.
It's
because-
not taken in anything that we're not currently dispatching.
Okay, so that, if what you're talking about happens in fiscal year 24, then the revenues are likely to be increased as well. Okay, and so I guess that probably answers my other question, which was, is the overview of the dispatch budget increase of $225,000, that does not, I was wondering if that was taking into consideration adding this other, it's adding the salary of the dispatcher, but it's not netting any other revenues out of it.
Correct.
Okay.
So it's also replacing the one individual who's already moved up to a
Yeah.
different position.
Right, so I'm actually kind of like two position.
They moved up one position, and so we're replacing that one, plus we need to replace another individual, just due to the increase.
Yeah,
Yes,
Okay, so there is one department that is budgeted for police wise, because we signed a contract, but we haven't commenced dispatching for them yet.
oh, cool, okay, and so that one is.
So
in there
that
up
one
there
is
too.
included in there.
Awesome. Okay, I think that was the only other question I had, because then the others are like just salary saving stuff, which we can talk about later. Correct.
So one of the things, I'm really pleased to see that you're speaking about a communications information system coordinator. That to me says we're going to free up Dylan some. That's a major plus, okay? But how much workload is there for that individual on doing the information systems aspect of it? And will that person fill in still as a dispatcher when they're not concerned with the spillman system? And what is that going to be a split role, or is that going to be strictly an IT related role? How does that pan out for our future here?
Currently, it is a straight IT role. However, she does cover the dispatch desk on an overtime basis, or if they're short and she's here, because she's Monday through Friday, day shift hours. So if there's a shortage on the desk, she'll leave her IT roles and she'll go dispatch. We are plenty busy with the amount of computers in the police department that have glitches daily.
I know that Dylan basically lived over there at times,
Yes,
so it'll be good to have somebody there that's able to handle that workload. So
it is. It's
and the
great.
specialty with the CAD system, keeping that up.
it's good to be thinking like that. So
Okay, is there any recap on this one?
Did Ally or Dan have anything? I don't want to. Ally or Dan, any questions? Okay, I didn't have any recap questions.
No, looks great. Thank you
All right.
so much.
I will. Introduce yourself again, because I don't think I know your name.
Oh, Martha Morse.
Martha Moore, thank you. Sorry, I'm terrible with names. I think I have met you before.
No worries.
Thank you. Thank you,
All right.
Connie. as
Thank
well.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
All right.
It comes up after the general discussion. Then we follow up. Okay.
Connie,
Connect
doing a
on,
great job.
Thank you.
we'll connect on the items.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Martha.
Thank you.
Thanks, all right. Scott. I think we're good. We're making good time.
It's a break.
Oh, yeah. maybe you can break.
Oh, no, it's fine.
I think Scott knows you break this.
You need a break, Gail? Gail, do you need a
I
break?
think we could power through, right?
Gail, can you power through this?
We usually don't get our first break till
Yeah,
2.5 hours.
I have
into
to
it,
find a
so.
thing to make it. All righty, so everybody knows Chief Cooney. He's
Yep.
here tonight to talk about the fire department, including EMS piece of it. As with Connie, each of you have had an opportunity to look at his budget presentation and look at the budget book. So he will be providing highlights, and I ask that you wait until the end of his presentation to ask questions. There you go, Scott.
Okay,
Great.
I don't see your presentation up on the screen.
Oh, I didn't hit share, sorry. I'm changing pages though.
Okay, good evening, everybody. The fire department budget's in 221. I think it starts on page 25 in the draft budget book. First slide. Gail. Just like the police department did, I wanted to present our mission, vision, and values. Every 5 years, as part of the department's accreditation process, we meet as an agency and develop our mission, vision, and values. And our mission kind of drives the daily expectations of the organization, what we're looking for our individuals to do in the field and how they present themselves to the public. Our vision is what drives our decision-making process for the agency, and looking at our vision to see if our decisions that we're making either fiscally or operationally meet what our vision and our goals are. And then our core values kind of set the standard for the individuals and what we expect our individual firefighters to display as attitudes towards themselves and towards the public. The next slide is our organizational chart. Now, this is the chart that was approved last year that included the staffing of Hartford Station 2, which is the Queechee substation that currently exists right now. We've had some new hires in the last few months that has not allowed us to actually throw the switch for full-time of Station 2 yet. We are all slated and ready to go on January 1st. We've been rapidly training our new hires, 7 in total, that have had to learn all new operations of the departments, our routines, our operational guidebooks, and then they've had to learn all the different pieces of apparatus and equipment. But we are hopeful, and we are going to throw the switch January 1st and start Station 2 staffing that station 100% of the time. But this was what it looks like. You see the fire chief at the top. We do have the fire prevention office that has 1 full-time employee and 1 part-time employee in it. I have an administrative assistant, Michelle Wheatley, who handles all our administrative functions, as well as she is my billing clerk that does all the ambulance billing and all miscellaneous billing for the fire department. And then last year we added the public safety mechanic, and 65% of his salary is covered in the fire department budget. The remaining salary is covered in the police department budget, but he falls under my supervision. Then I have the deputy fire chief, who's in charge of daily operations and training for the department, and he manages the 4 rotating shifts that work 24-hour cycles there at the Hartford station. And our design is to have an officer and 3 firefighters at Station 1 on the V.A. Cutoff Road, and an officer and a firefighter staffed at Queechee 24 hours a day. All right, the next slide. We keep adding to this slide every year, so we're going back to 2003 just to kind of show you the call volume that Hartford is a growing community, not in just its infrastructure and homes, but in calls for service as well. As we've been trying to catch up and better understand what those calls for services are and how we can adjust and respond to them. You see, we did drop down a little bit. Our projection is we will be lower than we were last year. A little bit of a dive into the data we all know what's happened with the pandemic that drove a lot of our numbers up for that year. And a lot of those calls that are in that column were to deal with some of the impact of COVID calls and responses to motels and hotels in the area were very high in the last year. And then we had a decrease in some of our heavy users of ambulance services in that period of time. The next slide shows some of the changes in the fiscal budget. First is wages. It was $2,400,000 in the previous fiscal year. We're up to $2,093,000. That covers 30 full-time employees and 8 part-time. I am proposing in this budget that the deputy fire marshal, the part-time position that's currently allocated at 32 hours, be increased to 40 hours and made full-time. Once again, I mentioned the growth in the communities, it's been excessive. The part-time position that was there in 21, he finally did leave the agency and retire, and I advertised for quite a while to find actually a past employee that wanted to come back and do it. Mm-hmm. He's able to provide about 20 hours a week. 32 is what's offered, but 32 is not a full-time job. So he's working 2 jobs and can give us 20 hours a week. So if I can provide a 40-hour a week opportunity, I can attract probably a lot more interested candidates to perform that function. And the inspection volume is quite significant. I can get further into that if you have questions about what actually happens in fire prevention. It also includes non-union wage increases that have been proposed, and then an estimation on what the possibility of union negotiated wages increase could be within the budget, because the contract is currently open. And then the next slide. Health insurance, increased. We show a difference from last fiscal year of about 47,600 in benefits. And then finally, overall difference, we're looking at an increase of 159,000. And then I've broken out where those major changes are occurring, and that's in salaries, benefits, retiree increases, workers' comp, and social security. Some quick budget highlights of what we are accomplishing. Obviously, we have another employee has a desire to complete the paramedic program, which, if you don't know, is a 15-month program where they take educational classes. They have to do, I think it's like 1,000 hours of clinical time in a hospital in different areas to learn their skills until they're eligible to take the national standards test. And then hopefully start with us. Hartford does offer tuition, 100% tuition for those wishing to seek paramedic certification. It does require a 3-year commitment. They sign a contract with the town.
Excellent.
Yeah, what's that?
Excellent.
Excellent. Yes, they do sign a contract with the town, saying they'll stay with us for 3 years. Let's see, phone system maintenance. Some upgrades are happening to the phone system at public safety. We have a share amount in there. Now, portable radios, we're on just a replacement cycle. We do 4 or 5 radios every year. Tires for apparatus, the cost for tires has increased considerably. I have a lot of tires on fire trucks, and they just got much more expensive to replace. Mobile data terminals is the communication system in the vehicles that one communicates with the dispatch center directly, but also provides mapping data, premise data, information about the properties, provides hazardous information to the first responders as they're responding to the field. That replaces another one of those. It does pay the rent for the Station 2 trailer that's currently in place. Now, as you know, there's a 2-bedroom living trailer that's parked in the parking lot in Queechee, that where the 2 people after that location are currently residing, and that rents about $24,000 a year. We're replacing some PPE. And this is replacement stuff when new call fighters start, or after to replace boots and helmets and those kind of things. General kind of wear and tear items that's in the budget. We're using salary saving FY23 funds for that. The municipal fire alarm system. We're doing a major upgrade to the software system that powers that monitoring system. So right now, Hartford has about 200 or so clients. Where businesses, homeowners can as well have a radio box attached to their building. And so if the fire alarm system, burglar alarm, panic alarms, this building has one here, that communicates directly via radio frequency to the fire station and is read in the fire station and the communication center. So it is the quickest transmission of an alarm anywhere in the community. Now, those radio boxes are paid for typically by the owner of the property. And then we charge $250 a year as a monitoring service. And we bring in about $37,000 in monitoring fees. The company that was providing the initial maintenance software is retiring their software in 2024. We've got numerous bids on different kinds of software that can do the work, and $35,000 will get us in that ball game. But that's allocated in there to replace the fire alarm monitoring software. And then ambulance service contracts, we just pulled those out and used FY23 salary savings. This pays for the service contract on the cardiac monitors and stretchers that are in the 3 ambulances we operate. Now we talked about reserve deposits already. I think on page 93 of your budget book is where you'll see the reserve transfer that happens in the general fund. So you allocate 100, right now we're requesting $180,994 to be transferred from the general fund to the reserve account. That funds 3 separate capital reserve plans in the fire department. The replacement of vehicles at $133,000. The self-contained breathing apparatus, if you remember, you executed about 12, the purchase of 12 units this last year. We put about 27.5 in that annually to keep that fund up. And then personal protective equipment is the structural firefighting gear. We just did one of those as well. The current balance in the fund is, as of that date, the 9th of September, was $201,000 currently sitting in reserve. And I don't believe we've made the transfer yet.
We have
Yeah, so there's about another 180 going in. And then finally is the revenue budget for the fire department. Here you see where we bill out and estimate our revenues for fire alarms, reports, requests, fire prevention fees. So for every property that's a public building that's built in the town of Hartford, they have to pay fees to the department to do the inspection services related to those projects. So we estimate what that revenue will be. 80 has been the typical number, and last year I had it at 90 and we were short. This year we are going to be over that. It's looking that way. And then fire reimbursements, ambulance services are fees collected from insurance companies or private payers for ambulance services. And then ambulance contracts, we do, the town of Heartland and the town of Sharon both have contracts with us to provide ambulance services to sections of their community. So we generate about, well, the actual for 22 was $750,000 worth of revenue. And finally, just my plug, I know we're talking about capital later on, but I hope I'm on the list to talk about how to turn the 1989 two-bay garage into a livable facility at some point. I hope we get the chance to talk about that sometime here in the future and talk about the storage building that we need at Station 1 as well. And that's all I have. Look forward to your questions.
Questions?
So am I correct in saying that we have absolutely no more game well boxes?
You are absolutely correct.
There are none.
Yep.
So what was game well boxes?
What is that?
Full style fire alarm boxes, pull boxes, pull
So-
stations.
Yeah, so for
Yeah.
many years, we used to maintain a municipal fire alarm system that was on the telephone poles. Like the town of Hartford actually owned space on the telephone poles. And we ran a wire from the Hartford Fire Station all through Wilder and White River Junction. And you'd see the red pole stations on the buildings. That would all ring bells at the fire station and tell us where we're going. This is much more sophisticated now. It's all.
So but there's a substantial cost
Mhm.
with the radio box system.
Sure. So I can get into that a little bit if you want.
I'm just, well, we're there now. I mean, so we're plugged into it. But now this software update we're talking about, I mean, are we held hostage basically by these companies that have this radio call box system? Because with the Gamewell system, that was pretty simple technology.
Mhm.
All right. But now it seems like, as I said, we're held hostage to the software upgrades, you know, by these radio call boxes. I mean, is there a way to have some sort of contract that there's upgrades that come with a certain cost? Or I'm just not quite sure I understand why it is we're having to do a complete software upgrade.
Well, the reason why is because the original vendor that provided the system is no longer supplying their product. That's why we have to
So the
replace the system.
so a new vendor that we go to, the other product will still work. We not got to replace all the. call
No,
boxes.
yeah, the nuts and bolts of the system. So this, we're talking probably 12 years ago, the Veterans Hospital wanted to upgrade their fire alarm system.
Right.
The Veterans Hospital purchased the radio box fire alarm system. And through a cooperative agreement between the town of Hartford and the Veterans Administration, all that equipment was given to us and started the radio box system throughout the community. With that, it gave the VA hospital 10 years without having to pay any rent for the system right now. So Larry, to your point, so 35,000 is the highest bid we got when we were estimating costs. There are ranges for systems out there from $10,000 for software up to 35,000. So we put the highest number in there as a possibility of what system would, what we could purchase for that money. And 1 year of revenue pays for it, the whole thing.
Okay.
It's a wash.
Do we need I mean, do we need the Cadillac of systems for the town of Hartford?
Until we do the formal RFP process, I probably can't answer that for you yet, because I don't know the capacity of all the vendors. So we put out quotation requests in order to do budget preparation, and we know that we're in the middle with the $35,000 mark.
If we didn't have to spend this, we could see some revenue from that, though. That's,
Yeah, and you have for years now. Since we've installed the radio box, you've received $37,000 worth of revenue annually for the last 12 years.
So I think as we get closer, we can
Yeah.
follow back up with you and let you know what we're getting for
Yeah, it's
for pricing.
yeah, and the RFP is gonna probably be over 20, so we're gonna be back to see you folks anyways to review the RFPs when that time comes.
where has that revenue generally been placed into?
It goes into the general, it offsets the general
Right
fund.
into the general fund.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
Other questions?
I mean.
Okay.
I know I appreciate your response and Connie's response about
Oh, yeah.
questions about, crisis intervention teams. I know we're a long ways off from that, but I wonder if I feel like I would be losing an opportunity to ask us to consider establishing some sort of reserve account for basically the objective of establishing crisis intervention, an unarmed crisis intervention. Because if I know we're not ready there yet, we're still exploring what that might look like, and I have more things I'd like to talk about with that, but I don't think this is the right place and time for it. But anyway, I feel like I would, whatever that phrase is, I would just be remiss, I guess, if I didn't ask, like, if we don't get something in the 24 budget, then we're looking at 2025. And so what do you think? Or I guess I'm curious to see if there's any sense of support for starting to establish a reserve for work in that way, because even if it means if something is established and it's a coordination of multiple agency, like, for example, the Howard Center program is run through the Howard Center and it's funded by 5 towns. There's others, the CREST program in Amherst. It's not all funded through one municipal operating budget. But I think if there's going to be action taken in any way, that we need to start planning to pay for it. Maybe.
Is that within the jurisdiction of select board though? Like, can we earmark funds for something that we haven't approved?
I think it's part of the budget discussion process and vetting it. And if it's not originally in the budget as it's presented, the select board has the opportunity to make adjustments to the budget.
I think of it in terms of like the climate action plan, like there's a climate action reserve fund for not specifically, not specific items, but we know we're going to need funds that will address things that are in our climate action plan. So I'm thinking along that way. I mean, we've been talking for a long time about community safety and community wellness. And I think I've not really known the right pathways or avenues to try to really move it forward. And I just feel like if we go through another budget cycle and we don't at least start thinking about how we might pay for it, rather like just conceptually that we want to invest in community safety and community wellness. And I do hope that the community safety review will be part of that, but it's only going to be one step in the process.
If I may, sir, the problem that I could see on face value on this, Kim, is that I would like to see, before we start talking about funding, the need for the crisis intervention versus what the police department and the fire department currently have for resources. Because as Connie stated, they send people to resources and Scott sends people to resources as well. And is there a need for something that the town has that we cannot supply, but but we can contact outside agencies. I see the same role of the person for crisis intervention doing the same thing that the police department, the fire department is doing right now, calling someone else for outside assistance. I'm just not sure what sort of a role you would see those people doing other than what's already being done.
I can answer that, and I would love to hear from Chief Cooney as well. I mean, I think we have an incredible public safety team all around, like, there's no question, and having the police social worker still kind of figuring out what the role of the peer support advocate. I'm not saying that they're not doing a great job at what they're doing, but clearly they're doing a great job, but we are still, there's something missing still. We're still getting a lot of concerns around community safety. There is a gap there. There's like, we need to do some sort of like community safety assessment, a gap. Where are the gaps and how can we strengthen the fabric of the community safety?
But what more would a full-time individual do to
I'm
solve
not talking
it?
about an individual. I'm talking about potentially a team of individuals that are on call 24/7, working in collaboration with local law enforcement, with the fire department, emergency services. You were here for the Howard Center presentation.
Yes, I was.
Yes. So along those lines, but in order to get to something like that, we've got to take some preliminary steps forward. That's my goal, one of my goals.
I just like to look at it from a cost reward basis towards the town, and that's, maybe Scott can help to fill in the gaps here that I'm not understanding.
Mary?
I don't know if this is part of your concern, but I actually had voiced this before to Tracy. And maybe it falls into this. I was thinking that the town hall, select board, committees, that I had hoped that there might be some kind of training for active shooters, or, that's crisis, and also, obviously, community issues outside of here, but I don't see anything that's being done to protect employees here in a situation where somebody, kind of flies off the handle.
So I actually just had a discussion with Lieutenant Howell this week about staff and safety. And so we're working on that actively. He's got some bullet point items that I've asked him to follow up on, so that in the very near future, you'll be hearing more
That'd be
about
great.
that.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So thank you for recognizing that.
So it seemed, Kim, just a question when you're talking about, like, we've identified in the town, I think, a need for community safety, and there may be different ways of achieving that, but there is a gap right now between what we have and what we might kind of strive for. So the idea would be to appropriate some money to a fund just for like a community safety reserve fund that would be there as we start thinking about, because it could take a while to implement like a Howard Center type response or something else that we haven't even imagined yet. Yeah, but it's sort of like the seed money for kind of, implementing that as we get closer to it. That's sort of what it sounds like. Okay.
But is there data to support that, though?
Look, I don't think we need to argue about whether doing a crisis intervention team or anything right now is the point. I guess the question is just, would we be interested, or at least considering, appropriating something like that? Go ahead, Ken.
The goal of this community safety review, that there is an RFP that was issued. We only got one response. It was from a company in Texas that was basically proposing more of a security assessment than a safety assessment. I've since identified some other organizations that might be willing to submit a proposal. But we have to, the RFP closed, so it would have to be re-released again, which I've been sort of gently proposing we might do again in January or beginning of 2023. So that will help us gather the data that is required to address what you're asking.
I mean, Mr. Chair,
Yeah, right.
with the presentation today, the fire department, police department, seems like they're directly on the front lines of our community. Is there a reason we would go with an outsourced vendor to identify needs in our community versus utilizing our extant departments and the data that they have? I mean, they're presenting a lot of data here. and breaking down calls, call volumes and call types and all sorts of things. What's the difference of that? I guess also, so another thought is I tuned into the VLCT municipal budgeting presentation they gave, and I remember something in that saying, you know, all funds that the select board raises in the budget needs to be earmarked for something specific. And I don't know how much of that can be hypothetical versus us creating a fund. I'm a little wary personally to create funds that are for broad categories, that even like something like CAS would say with the general intent of solving some issue. That to me personally is not clear enough for me to be supportive of it, even though I do think that there's always room for evolution and improvement, especially within things like safety. So I don't know. I mean, what role can to what extent, Chief Cooney, can we utilize the data that's coming out of your work, your department's work, to move forward towards that? And is there any room within the budgeting here that we can sort of consider to support that?
Sure. No, I know we've been talking about community safety for a long time and different iterations of how to fill the gaps that we believe may be out there. I think it's important. I think if we took a hard look, I know we do our jobs as best that we can. I know the police do it. I know communications does it. I know all municipal employees do. I think we're going to probably find a lot of gaps out there in many different areas, from, you know, engagement with law enforcement to engagement with first responders to our elderly who are home that have lack of resources to get to care, those struggling from addictions or other things out there. I think we're going to find there's lots of different gaps. I do think we collect a lot of data. Both agencies do. And the Spillman database is quite robust. I think there is value to an outside agency. Look, somebody who has analysts after their name to take that data and make it say something that we can take and then digest and then decide where we want to focus our crisis attention to. It may be 10 items that pop up as like, wow, we're missing this, we're missing that, and maybe we need to grab these 3 and really focus on it. I know from personal experience, and Connie said it very well, we could use 5 Kelseys tomorrow.
Right.
She's overworked. We get complicated cases that take days, hours, weeks to figure out for one person. And then she gets 5 of them on the same day. So that's overwhelming work. And there are lots of agencies that are dealing with the same thing throughout the state. We called Adult Protective Services today to report a situation that Kelsey's working on, the fire marshal's working on, and the health officer are working on all at the same time. So there's lots of things happening that we're connecting people with outside resources. So there's value to more. And there's more we can do for community safety for sure.
Yeah, sorry. Where would the difference be between a Kelsey and this crisis intervention team? No, that's the thing. I guess I'm not getting my head around, is that right now I know you have Kelsey halftime. I understand that. And you turn over as much as you can to Kelsey.
Mhm.
And the others time when you do not have a Kelsey available, what do you currently do?
We call the HCRS is the state designated mental health resource for Windsor County. So they have an emergency hotline. We call them. They're required by law to respond.
And how much more do you see the role of the crisis intervention team versus what Kelsey is supplying to you?
I think there are roles. The concept of crisis intervention and community crisis support teams has many iterations. The Howard Center's one. There's Texas is doing this. California's got many different iterations of how the interaction between community, law enforcement, first responders works. There's a lot of systems being tried that are being successful. I'm not sure which one works best for Hartford because I'm not sure what we're trying to accomplish yet. I know we've talked about it a long time, but nobody's yet pulled the trigger on, okay, we want you to build this. Because we're not there.
Is there data out there from communities from before and after institution of this?
Oh, I'm
type of
sure.
team? That's
I've read some early reports, Los Angeles was doing a whole bunch of stuff. I think Houston, Texas was doing a huge study on using different types of crisis intervention methods and things like that.
it comes down to cost versus reward.
No, and it's workload too, right? I mean, you've turned firefighters and police officers into jack of all trades for every kind of emergency. And really, we should refine our focus and not give us everything to do. And we should have some agencies that can handle some of the other things. Yeah.
Seems like a bigger discussion than what's ahead before us right now. Are there questions about the current budget? Let's
Well,
give
I
you
guess
guys
it's like have a revisit of, and Ally does have her hand up.
what's that?
You know, and Connie also mentioned, I think, I don't know if you guys saw the answers that came to my questions, but Connie also referenced the community support liaison team for Burlington Police Department and has invited Hartford to come and learn about their program. We have also been invited to learn about the CREST program in Amherst. Like there is, so it's a learning curve. And I think that it doesn't mean that we're going to take an exact model. I mean, I think what the Howard Center program does is a pretty applicable model for Hartford, but it doesn't have to be exactly that. And it would never, you know, whatever could happen would never happen without the support of the police and fire department. I mean, I think, but I guess I'm starting to feel a little like, okay, I've been saying this for 2.5, 3 years now, and I want us to kind of actually move forward in some way, and I don't know exactly how to do that. So, but should we
I think Gail noted, I mean, that's something you would note, the
Yes,
possibility.
definitely. So we will come back to this in January, and all of you need to put it on your notes as well, that
Yep.
this is an item that we would like to revisit. And you as a board need to make that determination whether or not you want to go forward
Yep.
with it. What I do need to know, is there any information that's related specifically to that funding that staff could assist to bring to the meeting when we're going to be discussing it? Or is there enough, Kim, do you feel that you have enough information to share and support? As you said, you've been speaking about it for a couple of years. Do you feel, you know, confident enough in what you have to provide? Or does any other board member have questions of items that we can research within reason?
Yeah.
I'm not offering staff to, you know, start at the beginning of time. However, if there is
Yeah.
data that we readily have available in our systems that we could provide.
Definitely one of the things. Sorry.
It's okay. Lenny, Kim, then Ally.
Definitely one of the things that I would like to see us circle back to is that something at Howard Agency, Howard Center. They serve a multitude of communities. And there's a difference with them because they cover the greater Burlington, Chittenden County area. We're in a unique situation. What's that?
Not Burlington, there's a separate, well, I mean, the Howard Center, there's 2 separate programs. They have one that serves Burlington, it's street outreach team, and then there's 5 smaller communities, which might include South Burlington, but I'm not sure if it does, but in Chittenden County, that is the community outreach team.
So they're in a unique situation. They're all centered in communities that are around Vermont. And we're in a unique situation that we sit right on the Connecticut River. And it's not something that I think that Hartford can totally take on by itself. It's another problem when it comes to jurisdictional towns, I guess, because we have Lebanon and Hanover and Windsor and Norwich that can have buy-in to this, and I'm not sure how that, it seems like it should not stop when it hits the river, but
Guys, just
Yeah.
again, if at some point we try and introduce some sort of Howard Center type response team in town, then these questions and discussions are great. I just
but-
feel like we're getting a little off.
But Gail is,
We don't even have a proposal. Like
Gail is asking about questions, and the question I guess I would have is that, is there any way that we can approach towns on the other side of the river to see what sort of
That
impact
seems
they
like
can
a
have?
request that's
Well,
pretty
it's-
broad for something where we don't even have a proposal. Kim?
I mean, I think, yes, honestly, I think there's like West Central Behavioral Health has a program like this that's already happening in Lebanon. Like, we might think, and I think we can consider looking at something of like a phase 1, a phase 2, a phase 3 over the course of 6 or 8 years or something like that. And I know, I mean, I did share, and I could share again, that what was interesting about the CREST program in Amherst, Mass was that, and that's a bigger community than Hartford certainly. But what was interesting is they've documented the whole process of forming the organization. I've spoken with the director who was hired, you know, so basically they came up with the idea. They've documented exactly how they developed the program and what the, you know, how it came to be, so how it began. I mean, I think Howard Center could do that as well. I don't know how, this is not my strength. This is why I kept, you know, was wanting a community safety review to start the process. So that's where I feel like I'm kind of at right now. This is a big project and I'm not capable of managing that project. So I'm looking to.
So I think if I'm hearing what you're saying, I mean, we need to look at, when we come back in January, I think getting the community safety review needs to be a priority.
That would be great.
Now, was that scheduled to be done in 23? You have to bring me up to speed.
It was issued in 22, that not, so, and the funding for it was requested. Miriam from H. Corey came in and made a formal request that it be funded through ARPA funds.
Okay.
So I guess we would want to look at if, in the budget, if when we have the ARPA discussion, if ARPA is not an option to fund it, because it's likely to be between $30,000 and $50,000 to do the community safety review.
Okay, because I don't have any record of the board approving that to come out of ARPA funds. The only
No,
item that I have.
It's been requested,
not.
but not,
Okay.
yeah, definitely not
We
approved.
did not.
Okay.
So we listen here from Ally.
Yeah. let's hear
Yeah,
from Ellen and then-
so we can
I know.
still,
Sorry.
Yeah, just to say briefly, and not to, I know this is a bigger discussion, but I am interested in the idea of a reserve fund to potentially fund, you know, community safety, community wellness related department and of some kind or a team. And I guess, yeah, my outstanding question would be, and I don't know if this is, I think community safety review being a priority, I certainly feel strongly about that as well. And maybe that being the first step, but you know, my outstanding question and curiosity, right, is what would be a meaningful amount to contribute to a reserve fund to build over time to actually, you know, build whatever team we'd be hoping to build. And it's hard to answer that question when we don't know what, you know, exactly what we're looking for and what the team is. So I don't know if there's an opportunity through, you know, I know Kim, you've done a ton of research on different models and the cost of those models and the process, as you know, just described with Amherst and others. And so there is an opportunity through some of that research to think about, you know, is it 10,000, is it 20,000, you know, per year over time for a reserve fund and what that actually looks like. I'll stop there because I know it's a bigger conversation, but just I would be supportive of exploring that as well.
Thank you, Ally. I think we're getting ready to move on from this
I just say
topic, so if
briefly.
you can very briefly address it.
Yeah, I think that doing a community safety review, I can see the value of it. I hear what you're saying. That would be great. I think it's irresponsible for us to create a reserve fund for it. I mean, we're asking taxpayers to set aside money for something that we haven't even researched the true need of. So.
Yeah.
So recap, Scott will follow up on the municipal fire alarm system pricing as it comes. And we have a follow-up for January on the community service, community safety, wellness, crisis intervention.
Great.
Can I make one comment?
Sure.
Please.
Only that I wanted to touch on Lanny, yes, the question of Connie, and I think Connie, it's on the to-do list for police about the impacts of training down at,
Yeah. I mean,
down
that's
at,
that, but
down at the solid waste facility. But I think more than just the savings in us sending people out to do training is the benefit of the frequency we get to do training by having a facility here in Hartford. Right now, I send firefighters out once a year to go to a burn building to experience a fire. That doesn't happen every year, or the shift that doesn't experience every year, but for firefighters to work in those kind of environments allows us to do our job, to do the rescues and those things. And right now, I can afford to do it once for every shift to send them down to a burn building or academy. So if we have facilities here that can simulate those events, the benefit we get is because of the increased frequency of training. And I think law enforcement would have the same thing to say. If we have something here to train on, it means we can train more frequently.
What is law enforcement go to like Pittsburgh? Is it that Pittsfield?
Pittsburgh, and we go to Pittsburgh. Actually, we've been going to the New Hampshire Fire Academy.
Go ahead.
It's a little bit closer and the cost is.
Do you, are you able, I don't know, I guess it's a question also for Connie, whether that training needs to be done in Pittsburgh, or if we had a facility here, if that would be enough to, to satisfy those requirements.
I'm sure that
So,
she'll gather that
yeah.
information.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right, thanks so much,
Thank
Scott.
you,
Very
Scott.
much.
Scott.
Appreciate it. All right, no consent agenda. I don't think we actually need executive session tonight.
You do.
We did. Okay, well, I'll take a motion. to go
For
into
the
executive session.
purpose listed.
Yes.
But before we move to executive session, Kim had mentioned in some of her emails, she had questions about the process of utilizing salary savings, the 23 salary savings, and how we're utilizing them to fund some of the items in FY24. And so would like to, it's an opportunity for us to discuss it right now. As the budget was presented and in the summary that was presented, it includes one-time salary savings to help reduce the tax burden to the residents. The question that Kim has, and I'm sure that she'll correct me if I state it wrong, is that would we rather increase all of the department headline items to the amount that would to the full amount, and then utilize the unassigned fund for the difference. So right now, the way that the budget sits is that the department has put in the amount that they're requesting. The column, the town manager column, has been reduced to recognize the one-time salary savings for each department, which then in turn reduces the amount that you're taking out of the unassigned fund. You could certainly take all of the money at the end of the fiscal year 23 that we're anticipating that we have for salary savings, put that into the unassigned fund, and then increase the amount that you're taking out of the unassigned fund. Did I say it correctly, Kim?
Absolutely, yeah.
Is that an apples to apples thing though? I don't,
Well, can I explain why?
yeah, I don't get it.
The difference to me is that, when we're looking at the, future budgets, but future boards looking at the budgets are gonna suddenly see like, oh, this equipment, we didn't pay anything for this last year, but now it's $20,000 this year. Why is that? And we don't see the narratives for previous years in the budget book. So for being able to compare the actual expenses that the town needs to incur, like we can, I think we can have just a clearer picture of what the town needs to spend if we keep the line item the amount it's supposed to be, but basically still reduce the tax burden by taking the amounts we were going to apply for salary savings to those individual line items and reducing the basically taking more money out of the unassigned fund balance. So taking the salary savings, putting them in the unassigned, and then taking them out of the unassigned and taking them off the bottom line.
But currently, they've already been accounted for within this budget, salary savings, correct?
Proposed.
Yes.
It's been proposed.
Proposed.
Correct.
I just think you're reinventing the wheel here. I think it's a lot of work to go through for purposes, you could have a simple explanation next budget season of, why we had these. I don't understand why it is that we have to do that. I mean, simple explanations from department heads serve very well.
Mr. Chair.
Right.
Gail, can we ask your recommendation?
My recommendation is how the budget I
Yeah,
put it together.
she did it this way for a reason. Yeah,
So keep it that way.
yeah, she did it this way for a reason because it's more streamlined. Maybe I don't know. It just
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just more able to like digest and relate to these numbers line by line. And if we have salary savings that are one-time salary savings, I'm not gonna argue, like I'm happy, I'll very much support this budget as presented, well, as we finalize it. I'm not gonna fight it, but just like for I'm sorry, I'm not articulating well this evening, but
talking about tracking purposes.
just for, I mean, you know, when we've talked about this, when we look at the budget every year, we're looking at previous years, like we're comparing all the time. So, you know, if we're gonna spend $200,000 from salary savings, then we're gonna see lines throughout the budget that are, well, why is this one $15,000 more this year than it was last year? And why is this, you know, why are we spending, why was it zero last year? And it's just like gonna come up.
I understand,
however
but
many
then,
times it was.
then we get an explanation from staff that solves that issue.
Providing, hopefully, we will like have a wonderful record of consistent town employees and institutional knowledge that I hope we will have for many, many years to
But
come.
Even if we don't have this, the town staff will have the records,
Yeah, I
that
mean,
will
certainly,
indicate that,
it's
so.
not,
you know, it's all gonna be documented. It's all, you know, on paper.
it's fine. I
Right.
don't need to fight that one. I'll choose my battles. I'm gonna choose community safety.
Okay.
Um,
We won't fight that one then.
yeah.
Tonight. All right, I'll take a motion to go in executive session if we can.
That good? Anyone else? Yeah,
Everybody?
so the plan.
I'm just here to, I was here to support you to have the discussion.
Thank you. I
Not
appreciate
really.
it. And, yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Have you let that one
I
go?
would like to make a motion.
Okay, Rocket's making a motion.
That in accordance with Vermont's open meeting law, 1 V.S.A, section 313, I move that the select board enter into executive session to discuss confidential attorney-client communications of which premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage, and the appointment or employment or evaluation of a public officer or employee.
Yep, sorry. Second,
Okay, got a second? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
I.
Aye. Opposed? Okay.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, I'll take a motion. We're back. I'll take a motion to come out of executive session.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to come out of executive session.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Mary will second. All those in favor, say aye.
I,
Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. That's unanimous.
Oh, and Ally's coming back on. Ally, are you in favor of exiting executive session?
Yeah, I just got on.
Okay. I will take, so we're out of executive session. We took formal action in executive session, so we will take a motion.
no action was taken in executive session. Formal action takes place outside of executive session.
I'll take a motion.
Just make clear on that.
Thank you, Lanny. I'll take a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to authorize and approve the separation agreement as negotiated with the employee and to authorize Michael White as chair to sign all documents necessary to effectuate the agreement.
I have a second.
I'll second.
Ally will second. Discussion. Margaret?
While I support the direction that this board is taking with the leadership change in town, I don't think that this was the right way for us to proceed. So I'll be voting against.
Lanny?
I am not going to vote for this due to the fact that I am in disagreement with some of the terms of the contract. And I cannot, in all good faith, sign off or vote yes for this. I'm going to vote no.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay.
Wait, what was Dan, were you on? Aye?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So 5 in favor, 2 opposed. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.
I have a second.
I'll second.
Rocket will second, or Dan.
I think Dan.
All those in favor say aye.
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 So, Dan, second?
Either way, it doesn't matter.